Hi, this is Jordi from Agents at Work. Today I have the pleasure to be with Roy Derks from IBM and author of multiple technical books. Hi, Roy.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thank you very much for taking the time to record this podcast.
Yes, of course, of course. It's been a while since we met at the AI Engineer Conference.
Yes, it was actually like a really good conference, and the main topic was AI agents. And people were saying like, "Well, this is the year of AI agents, same as it was in 2024 and same as it was in 2023." But I think that we are in March right now, and they are already like proven wrong. Like actually, this looks like it's gonna be the year of AI agents for real. So I introduced you as a member of IBM. What do you do there?
So I work on developer experience for the WatsonX platform, which is IBM's platform to build AI apps. So you can get like model access or deploy agents, even fine tune or customize model. So basically all the things you can do at any provider of large language models.
Okay. And usually, who are the kind of customers of these platforms? It's people that join IBM from their website. It's like self-service or like big industries.
It's a little bit of self-service. It's also a whole range of enterprise, Fortune 500 companies. So I don't know if people know, but IBM is like a 100-year-old company. So it's pretty established and lots of trust between like governments and enterprises. So it's definitely a different kind of clients that I saw when I was at startups before.
Yeah, I think that right now it's 114 years old, and at the beginning was like international business machine. So it was a lot of
hmm
like scales and things like that. And then it became like the super big company that revolutionized like in the 20th century. It has a lot of history. I really like history of computing.
hmm
And it's amazing to see how core IBM has been there. Just to let people know, like I used to work at IBM too before, so that's why I know so much about the internal history. But everything from microprocessors and most of the big companies that people recognize today as one of the verticals of computing, Intel, Oracle, like databases, microchips, all these like spawned
hmm
from IBM. And I think that the last thing that I will say about the company is I think that it's the company with more employees that have Nobel Prizes in the world. Like, I think that until now, like, nobody beat that. Goes for everything from chemistry to medicine. So pretty cool there.
Yeah, there's a really big research department, and I think a lot of new joiners are coming directly from like universities or having done PhDs. Lots of smart people.
Yeah, for sure. So you're right now in the Bay Area?
Yes, I moved here from Amsterdam since last June. So far, really liking it. If people have been to the Netherlands, the weather is kind of rainy. So being in the Bay Area is definitely an improvement.
Yeah, I agree. I live in Vancouver right now. I'm pretty happy to. I have convinced my wife to go back to the Bay Area, so it's going to be like a big improvement in my life. So you said that WatsonX is the platform where people interact with AI and they are able to fine tune models and run them. It's only for models, agents. How does that work?
Oh, you can do a whole lot of things in there. The name Watson actually comes from a long history. People might also remember the first time Watson was introduced. It was like an algorithm that was able to beat different professional. I think it was chess players or some other popular board game.
So there was like Blue Deep that it was the one for chess, and then it was Jeopardy.
Oh
Jeopardy
yeah,
was like that game in the US where people have to
yeah.
reply answers, and it was with natural language. And this is like 2016 or so.
Yeah, so a long time already, and now it's available as a platform called WatsonX. So it's not using the same models or technology from back then, but it is a place where you can get APIs to access models that are either open source models, like models from Hugging Face, like a Llama or Mistral, and then a whole range of like smaller models. And then we also develop some models of our own at IBM, but typically people can mix and match models however they like. So you get APIs for these models. And then we have ways to deploy agents. And if you deploy these agents, you can use our models, other models, but you get one place to build and deploy them. And then there's a whole range of features around RAG or working with big data in general. I don't think we use the term big data anymore, but for the lack of a better term, there's a whole range of features that were used to be big data features.
Yeah, many people think that big data is like from the 2010, but in reality, like it just changed the name. And actually, most of the thing that back then was big data is not big data anymore. But for
Mhm.
industries, like big data now, it's bigger than ever.
Yeah, so maybe I can say machine learning tools. That might be a better word for it.
Yeah, these are the kind of things that industries know when they have the problem. So, like they talk with IBM because it's like, well, there is a lot of data here. I don't know how to call it exactly. It's not about the buzzword anymore. It's like, well, this is a real problem. How do we handle this? And you are there for helping. So you said that people are able to run agents there. What's an AI agent in this context?
So an agent in this context is an agent someone built using one of the popular open source frameworks. So it could be LangGraph, could be Crew AI, Llama Index. We're going to add support for AutoGen as well. And what we see people do there is typically build like a single purpose agents that do like research for ArcSIF papers or help them do market research or connect to their data, pull it out, and then being able to analyze that data. So I would say it's mostly single purpose agents. We are thinking about multi-agent. How can we solve sort of multi-agent workflows? And for that, we have some other products, but the platform itself, it's mostly focused on connecting with models, deploying these single purpose agents, and getting a really nice developer-friendly way to interact with them.
Yeah, I think that your definition is closer to the one that Josh from Tolbit said here. It was like, well, it's an LLM. It's just connected to tools and data. And,
Yeah.
there it is. That's
I mean, there are some agent frameworks like Llama Index. They really focus on workflows and being able to describe what's going on. And a whole range of people are trying to turn something that's undeterministic into deterministic by doing a whole range of customizations. For me, I would say that layer of making LLMs more deterministic is probably happening inside your tools. So you might have a tool that's composed of different tools, or a tool that's like making sure you take certain actions and you don't take other actions. So where I see most people implementing sort of logic is more on the tool side than actually on the agent itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Something that is curious for me, it's like how low level tools are right now. Like most of the people are taking, for example, the GitHub API and then creating a tool for each call. So you can create a repository, you can destroy a repository, you can rename a repository. And something that worked really well for us, like I don't know if you have experience with clients doing this, but it's actually like breaking this and making it as an agent itself. So what we say is like, well, we have an agent that knows how to deal with GitHub. So instead of having an agent that has like 200 calls, some for GitHub, some for Jira, what we do is like, well, we have an agent that can talk with other agents. And those tools that are the other agents only have like one endpoint. And it's like, give me the language, like natural language, like text.
Yeah.
Ask me what you want, and I know how to use the tool under the hood. Is this something that you are seeing, or most of the people are still using like one endpoint, one tool?
So it depends. I guess it also depends what models you have access to. So I talk to people that can only use certain models because their company didn't purchase credits at Anthropic or decided not to go with OpenAI, but some other vendor. Some other people only can use open source models, or they can only use closed models. They run in their own environments. So it really depends on the model. I think a lot of the things people do today, they really rely on models being smart to do planning for you. So if you give 5 arbitrary tools to a model, like you said, like Jira, GitHub, whatever, the bigger models are probably able to compose those tool calls in a certain way that you get what you want. Smaller models might not be able to do this. So I can also see people doing some sort of deterministic workflows inside their tools or inside their agents. So I'm seeing a little bit of both, but it really depends on what kind of models do you have access to and how fixed do you want to make the paths that your users are taking.
IBM is in a really good position because for many, many years, they have had a relation with really big companies and industries like the pharmaceutical industry, the automobile industry. So, like there's like long-term things. And what you said about contracts is something that many developers don't think about because they say like, well, put my credit card into ChatGPT and I can start using the API, but that's not how a multinational works. Like our team only kind of just put the credit card there. Something that I am surprised that I don't know if it matches your experience is this idea of how much big industries are actually using AI. Most of the time, they are not the first ones when, there is a new technology. Like most of the people didn't jump into mobile. Like there were a lot of indie developers and things like that. But with AI, this seems to be a shift. Like I have seen like many, many big companies that actually when there is a new platform, most of the people try to match what the old world looks like and say like, well, who's going to be the Stripe of AI agents? And for example, what I have noticed is like with this new paradigm, the Stripe of AI agents will probably be Stripe. The Apple of AI will probably be Apple because big companies are actually embracing this technology and using it internally. Does this happen with like other industry, let's say like finance, pharmaceutical, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So historically speaking, I don't think the Apple of AI has to be Apple or the Stripe of agents has to be agents. If you think at Apple, they're quite struggling to release their AI features, and I think they actually announced pulling back some of their announcements. So the Apple of AI might actually not be Apple, but maybe it's OpenAI. If you think about Stripe, I think Stripe is doing excellent work with MCP, with agents, and building tools for developers to use Stripe and payments with AI. So they might actually be the Stripe of AI. And I think if you look at customers or companies like IBM, it's really about, are these companies able to adapt to changes? How quickly are they able to do it? And how much sort of red tape or blue tape or whatever kind of tape you want to talk about, how many rules are there preventing them from getting somewhere? So it really depends on the company and how fast they're able to turn around and adopt new technologies. I think the first response of most enterprises when something like AI pops up is there are going to be two types of people. There are going to be developers in a company being really excited about building something. And then there are going to be legal people who say, this is exciting, but also really scary. So our advice is to stay away as long as you can until we figure out what's needed. And then the question is, who's going to get the upper hand? Is it the legal people? Is it the developers? Are it product managers? And is the company able to do what they need to do?
Okay. And so far from IBM, what are you seeing? Like people, like who is winning this first battle between legal and engineering?
So in IBM, of course, we have legal departments and we have lots of developers. I think we're doing pretty well in terms of shifting towards AI, in terms of bringing AI into different products that we build. I don't think we're doing it at the same pace as OpenAI or Anthropic is doing, but I guess that's normal if you have a company that's publicly trading and then companies that are sort of new and still figuring things out. But if you look at other big companies like Google, I think they're going at a similar pace as we are.
Yeah, and we talked about this before, but there is this idea of IBM is like 114 years old, and it has been reinvented like multiple times, and it looks like it's doing really well right now. No? Like how long since you joined IBM, and what changes you have seen inside the company since then?
Yeah, so I used to be a startup guy. I either had my own startups or I worked with startups. And I joined IBM like 2 years ago when the startup I was at then, which is called Stepsen, was acquired by IBM. And since then, actually, I think the stock price has almost doubled. So it might be related to the acquisition of a very small 15 people company. Or it might be that we're just doing really well in this new AI area. It's probably a little bit of both, being at the forefront of a lot of things we do with AI with our small team. But it's great to see everyone adapting to sort of new realities, being able to work with models, being able to build agents, figuring out how we can use this technology for good rather than to replace things that we're already doing.
You said that you used to be a startup guy. So what kind of startups did you work before?
Oh, all sorts of startups. So I'm a lifelong developer, and I started to write code when I was 14, and I had a startup idea. So my main hobby was either playing soccer or watching movies. So I built a platform where people could trade DVDs because there was no Netflix, there was no, I mean, you could probably download movies, but I was 14, so I probably didn't figure out how to do this. And it was also illegal, so I probably shouldn't, even if I could. So I built a platform where you could trade DVDs. If you would have DVDs at home, you would list them in the platform. And then you would also have your wish list. And the wish list will be matched with DVDs other people had that were also matching whatever you were offering. So I wanted to make like two-way trades. So I built my first algorithm just by joining a lot of SQL tables and doing some things in there. But I was 14, so I guess that's okay to do. So that was my first startup. I stopped when I went to university. I did some other startups in the marketplace sort of sphere where I had startups to buy and sell electronics or other devices. And I did some DevTools startups. And I finally ended up at this GraphQL as a service startup, really building a developer tool that developers could use to build GraphQL APIs out of existing data sources. So that's sort of in short everything I've been doing.
Yeah, and I don't want to give away your age, but when you said that you were doing the first one about like Netflix for DVDs of people trading them, what kind of technology did you use back then?
I was using the LAMP stack, so it was like was using PHP, HTML, probably MySQL. Even though I didn't really know how to do MySQL, so it's probably PHP, MyAdmin, and MyJava sort of trying to figure out what to do next.
Can you imagine how different that experience would have been if we had things like LLMs back then?
Oh yeah, it would have been super fast. So I learned to code by reverse engineering an open source framework called OpenCart, which is like an e-commerce platform to build e-commerce websites with PHP and MySQL and HTML. And I was also making some money on the side by building actual web shops for people using the same framework. But I reversed engineered everything. So I was sort of building on things other people built. It would have been way faster with large language models. I was chatting with someone yesterday and my IDE was Notepad++. And at some point, I installed a plugin to actually upload whatever you saved using FTP directly to my website. And this was kind of like mind-boggling. Like you're able to click and save and then deploy stuff on the go. If you look at what you can do today, it's like very different.
It's the first version of GitHub Actions. You just like click save here and it just like gets pushed up, like continuous delivery, but to the next level.
Yeah, it's like Notepad++. I think they had a small little gecko icon, something
Yeah, it was
like
a
that.
chameleon.
Chameleon, yeah. So, no, those were fun times. And today you just have plugins running in your IDE. I'm using VS Code and they're doing everything for you. It's such a difference.
So what was your role in these startups? Because you also said that at the beginning was more like marketplace based, and then it was like developer tools. And then finally, like that you joined IBM after an acquisition of the previous startup. And did your role change at all?
Yeah, it changed quite a bit over the years. I learned to code in order to start my first business, which was the DVD trading platform. And at some point during university, I was making money on the side by building websites for people, building applications. And the sort of last startup I founded, or one of the last ones, I was in there for like 3 or 4 years until we had to shut it down. I was building the entire platform. We had some people working with us to also build stuff. And somewhere in there, I kind of got bored a little bit by building marketplaces. And I actually started to building some internal tools that we could use to speed up development. And then that sort of led to me writing blog posts about how can you do better development in Laravel, or I was using Laravel at the time, or how can you do stuff in TypeScript, because I was also rewriting our entire Laravel code base to TypeScript because I kind of started to hate PHP at some point. So I really got into the mode, how do you build stuff for developers rather than just building a platform that customers use. And the customers have no clue whatever tech you're using. They probably don't even care. So that's sort of how I started to create blog posts, be active on social media, speak at conferences, and started to write programming books.
Nice. What are some of the titles so people know what your background is on the topic?
So they're actually behind me. But my first book was about React. So React.js, the web framework. I was doing React.js for a long time and going to conferences, getting people excited, and actually seeing sort of the stages of a framework evolving, like React being something really, really small, really tiny, to now actually being, well, going from a library to almost a framework today. At least I don't think there are many people using React without something like Next.js or Remix to actually host it. So it's fun to see libraries going from an idea, something that gets picked up, to something really big. Other books were about GraphQL. So GraphQL was kind of similar to me. I picked it up really early on. I was at a hackathon in Berlin and the guys from GraphQL were there. So if people remember, GraphQL used to be a startup that made it possible for you to host stuff as GraphQL. And they were doing this in like 2015 or 2016. So that's where I picked up GraphQL. And then I've seen it mature all the way to where we are today. And people are using GraphQL for like their entire orchestration of data. So it's fun to see these things grow while also creating content on it and get developers excited.
So for anyone who has like React, I'm sure that all developers know what it is, but GraphQL, I know like people that they just heard the name, but they don't know exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
What does the technology do? Like what problem does it solve and how does it do it?
So you can think of GraphQL as a API specification. It's the same as OpenAPI or OData are also API specifications. The thing that does slightly different is there's more control to how you retrieve the data. So if you think of OpenAPI, so let's say REST calls are kind of fixed. You have an endpoint / product. It returns your list of products. It might have 100 fields in there. You always get the 100 fields. Some people might add like filters to reduce the amount of fields, but that's sort of takes you away from RESTful. So there's whole discussions to be had about RESTful versus REST-ish. So let's assume you're doing RESTful. If you compare it to GraphQL, you get an API schema. and you're able to retrieve different fields from there, but you can decide what fields are being retrieved and what fields aren't. So there's more control to the, let's say, front end or app developer interacting with these APIs. And today, GraphQL is also being used a lot to help you federate different GraphQL APIs. So this makes sense in the concept of like microservices, where you have a service that exposes a GraphQL schema. So you can interact with the service directly. But let's assume you have 10 different services and want to combine them into a single API. Then that's where GraphQL comes in. So this is something companies like Salesforce or Netflix are kind of famous for doing. And also Shopify, for example, they're a good example. They actually changed all their admin APIs for developers to be GraphQL by default. So it's being used quite a lot. It was really popular like 5 years ago. I think we're sort of past the hype. I've seen those graphs of like hypes of excitement, and at some point people are being less excited, but people being less excited in general doesn't mean you get less adoption. So it's being adopted quite well. So that's fun to see. And even now in the AI age, I can see GraphQL being adopted even for AI purposes.
How does that sound? Like, how does that work? Because it sounds a bit like MCP. Like this idea of, well, the LLM needs to use an API, and then you say like, well, this is like open API. There is like some kind of relation on, well, the LLM needs to interact with the service. It needs to know what the service can do and what data it requests, and then interacting with it. So how does like GraphQL, MCP fit together?
So in terms of GraphQL in AI, it's kind of similar to using SQL with AI. So if you connect a database, let's say a relational SQL database, you can do your select statement. You can either hard code it, so you can say select all products from table products, for example, or you can have large language models generate the SQL query based on the database schema. If you think about GraphQL, you can do something similar. So you build the GraphQL schema, but then the large language model formulates the GraphQL query or the operation. So you give control to the model in order to generate whatever it needs. So assume you have a tool, which could be GraphQL. The GraphQL tool could just expose the schema, and then the model could, based on the schema, generate a request. Similar to SQL, where you would give the SQL table to the LLM is going to generate the SQL query, and then your database is going to return the data back. So this is something we see working quite well, because you don't get all the overhead of assuming you have a tool to get product info. Let's assume the tool is just a wrapper around your REST API. It's going to return a lot of data you don't need. So with GraphQL, the LLM can just retrieve the price field because it only needs the price. It doesn't need to know about all the variations of the product, of all the internal identifiers, categories, whatever you might have linked up there. So we've been doing this for the past 2 years, like showing how you can use GraphQL in the concept of large language models and using it as some sort of connector to all your data. But then at some point MCP came in like a few months ago, and we actually saw you can combine MCP pretty nicely with GraphQL, but MCP might be a better fit for people because you don't have to build the clients anymore. The clients are already there.
Yeah, something that I like, the sentence that I usually use here, it's like AI is the new UI. So you need to assume that your service is going to be consumed from everywhere, that it's Apple Intelligence, that's some MCP related app, or your fridge, like pretty soon. So this is the same idea, like you just expose things, but you don't need to build a client, because the client can be even built at runtime by an AI that just needs to like check the documentation and writes the exact code for integrating with you and for getting that data. So this is something that some companies were playing around and actually like using maybe in production.
So MCP, you mean, or GraphQL?
GraphQL.
So we see companies using GraphQL in all sorts of stages, also in production, in testing, in whatever. So we've been doing this GraphQL I've been doing for a long time. GraphQL with AI for like the past 2 years. And we see companies use this as well. There's a lot of things that still need to be figured out. Like some models are really good in generating the GraphQL operations. Other models are really bad at doing this. So it's always a trade-off, like what model do you use and how well is it able to generate the GraphQL fields. GraphQL also has things like persistent queries. This is where you almost create like an endpoint. So you can always use that in case you have to work with a model not able to generate GraphQL. But so far it's been really useful. But it also made me really excited for MCP to be a new standard where you can build MCP servers for GraphQL, for databases, for whatever, and just use it as a connection to all the different clients. Because I think the value for companies is going to be in exposing MCP servers based on their data. And the value is less going to be on building the best MCP client. I mean, of course, you need a client. The clients is just the interface. The actual value is making sure your data is easily accessible and people are able to discover your MCP server so they can connect easily to your data.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like that's what I mean when I say like the new UI, because it's something that you don't even know where it's going to be consumed. So you just need to expose it in a way, and other people are going to have their own clients and be able to pull it, and they just want to have your data. And you don't care what they are going to do with it, like how they're going to show it and things like that. You give a bit of control there. With the browser, it was a bit of this idea, but then you had to do the presentation layer. So what people were doing is like, okay, I know that I need to expose my service in a way that they can consume. So I know that they have a browser, or I'm going to assume that they have a browser. So they can pull my HTML, my JavaScript, and they are going to be able to run it there. But I still had to build the UI. But now that we have intelligence at the edges, I think that it's going to be like, there's not going to be like one browser for MCP, but it's going to be like many kind of applications that are able to consume MCP data. Is this something that you have seen already happening? Like I've seen like more and more MCP clients, but I don't know if companies are building their own too.
I haven't seen clients per se being built by bigger companies. I have seen a lot of companies building the servers, and in all sorts of ways. Some people are building specific servers for whatever they do. Other companies are more focused on sharing open source examples of their MCP servers. And then you have the whole discussion like local versus remote. Are you using the studio transport type, or are you going for SS? And then I think it was just announced that there's an open PR for like streamable HTTP, which probably is a weird term to use because it looks like it's just HTTP with optional SSE. So I don't know why they call it streamable HTTP, but it's I don't know.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of exciting. So I'm hoping to see whenever we figure out the whole protocol for remote MCP, that if we're going to end up with HTTP, which is probably the best because everyone already has HTTP, people can just offer MCP endpoints next to all the other APIs they're building.
Yeah. Something that I saw in this direction already being built like months ago was LLMs.txt, that it was something similar to robots.txt. So it was something like a file that you put in your well-known paths in your URL, and then you just feed data to an LLM. So when they go to your site, they're able to pull it. Looks like many people didn't know exactly how to work with this, because then the client needs to do something still. That it's like, well, when I get this file, how do I navigate the web? Like, what do I do with the data that it says there? But I like to think that eventually we're going to go like move into this direction where, like actually, because we have intelligence on the other side, if I just give instructions, they are able to iterate with those instructions, even if there is not like a custom standard that they need to implement that it's as heavy as MCP. However, MCP is pretty well established right now. Like I am surprised of how many excitement there has been in the last weeks for it.
Yeah, it's moving really fast. I remember when I first took a look at it, I think it was like at the end of last year. I thought, well, this might be a really good idea, but it's Anthropic releasing it. Are we going to see any adoption outside of Anthropic? And I think the first few months were kind of okay-ish. People were picking it up, but not extremely. And then when we were at the AI Engineer Conference, there was this workshop, and in my mind, it exploded from that moment, or maybe a few weeks before. But it's really interesting to see. I also wonder how much of this is related to actual coding agents. If you think about V0 or Bolt or Replit or Lovable, they're all building these coding agents. And whatever tools, or what actually developer tools they're offering to people using those coding agents, developers are just adopting it. So I also feel like if you have a coding agent, you sort of get the power of pushing what technology people are using.
Yeah.
You can see some companies like Supabase, they share their signups on X, and you can actually see their growth like being pretty good. And then as soon as they got included in V0 and Bolt and all the other guys, they were sort of going straight up in terms of adoption, because developers just want to see something being built, and if it's using Supabase or some other way to do Postgres, they probably don't really care. It's whatever the LLM generates for them.
It really helps with distribution. And actually, like things like Lovable, I think that right now they took the place from TravelPerk, that was like the fastest growing startup in Europe. And now I think that it's Lovable. Like when you see the numbers that these people are pulling, not only on usage, but actually on revenue, it's mind blowing. So yeah, like if you get adopted by one of these, developers are the ones that are testing this the most. And I think that's why where we see mostly it's coding agents, because it's like developers building for developers.
Yeah.
But I think that in the next like few months, we're going to see like this permeate to the rest of industries.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in DevRel as well, and I know people are doing like sponsored videos and all these kind of things. I wonder if at some point there is going to be sponsored coding agents where you say, "Hey, Lovable, I want to push my developer products. Can you include my product name in the system prompt? And here's my LLMs.txt file. Please do this with us." I would wonder if we're going to see things like that.
I hope we do. Like I think that we are moving more and more into that world. This is something that 5 years ago it would have sounded like science fiction for me. Like you
Mhm.
have told me like, well, you talk to this thing and then it builds a website and then you tell him how to deploy it and then it goes and do it without anyone having done the integration themselves. This is mind blowing. So I am really really happy that we are living into this timeline.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who learned coding on their own, I needed to figure out how things worked. I needed to search the internet. I needed to scroll through numerous tutorials, figuring out how to do stuff across different versions, browsing through GitHub, looking at source code, figuring out how to do stuff. If I would have a model next to me and I could just ask, "Hey, why do I get this error in PHP?" I would have been moving so much faster.
Yeah. So well, happy that we are living into that timeline. So you mentioned that IBM has its own models. What's their name? What are they built for? Sizes? How are people using them?
Yeah. So these are the we call them the Granite series. I think we're on 3.2 now or
Yeah.
3.3. It's a collection of small models. So these are, I think the biggest one is 8 billion, but most of them are like 3. There's like a reasoning model, I believe there's a vision model, and then sort of general purpose models, and also some models that are customized for like banking or insurance or all sorts of business use cases. So these are small models, meaning that in theory they will be cheaper to run while still being efficient enough to help you with a lot of different use cases. So that's pretty exciting to see. We're building these models. Personally, I'm mostly using the bigger models. I think the smaller models make sense if you're doing some sort of routing where you might have multi-agents and some agents have the smaller, more specialized models for specific tasks, but you still have like a bigger general purpose model doing all the planning and all these kind of things. And then we heavily focus on model customization or model fine-tuning because most enterprises, they're not interested in who won the Oscars last year or this kind of data where a lot of the bigger models are trained on. It doesn't make any sense in an enterprise context. So we're also helping them to customize their models based on their use cases, or if you're a big insurance company and you have insurance files, they're different across countries, you might have policies that span different packages. You might have been with the insurance company for 10 years. Your policy might be different than someone just joining. So all this data, if you customize the model once, it's aware of all this data. If you need to do RAG or tool calling every time someone asks a question, it's going to be way more expensive over time. So these are kind of the things we help companies with on the model side.
Yeah, I think that the small models, like for me, have like two big places to be. One is to run in the edge, so something like mobile and things like that. I don't know
Mhm.
if people are using Granite for that, but I know that people are starting to build. And I guess that the better hardware we get there, maybe like the next iPhone or something has like something specific for running LLMs, and that's going to be a big push on moving on mobile. But the other one, it's at scale. For the things that they do, for example, if I want to extract data from a couple of invoices, I can just
Mhm.
upload this to ChatGPT and there is no problem. But if I was a really big company and I had to do this like millions of times per day for tickets, for example, then it's where, having a small model that gets the thing done may be
Mhm.
better. So I think that for industry standards, like having these small models brings a lot of value. And I actually tried the Granite Vision, the 3.2 right now. It's in Olama, if anyone wants to try it. I think that there is some kind of partnership there because they actually announced the 3.1. I think it was like last October. And I tried it at the beginning, and Llama 3.2 seemed to beat on tool calling. That was my
Mhm.
main use case. But then with 3.2, it was already, in this case, on the IBM's models, you could see like a big jump on performance. So it seems that the team is cooking there.
Yeah, I think especially so all the Granite models are open source, so you could run them on Hugging Face as well. They're kind of popular on Hugging Face actually. I believe especially the Vision model, the latest one, is really popular on Hugging Face. So we see people adopting it through there. I mean, in the end, I'm in the SaaS business. I would like to see people use these through our APIs. But it's good to see. I always think if people have access to it open source, they can get a taste for it. They might try and run the models on their own. They might run it locally in their machine. I think it's going to be hard for individual companies to run models at a competitive price all by themselves. But maybe they will change. Maybe they will change as soon as the requirements for hardware are getting smaller and well,
I think that cloud economics are going to hit LLMs too. So the idea, like, we have like really good computers right now, but for example, you have to serve something. Somehow it's cheaper or better as a whole to run in the cloud. If I am a really, really big company, maybe my bill it's too big. Like there's some premium in being in the cloud. So there are like some big companies that say like, no, I want to run this on bare metal or in our old cloud. I think that IBM had actually a vertical that was for hybrid clouds. That this idea of, well, there's some things that run in IBM's infrastructure and some others that, like you take care of it. But I think that it's a really good thing for IBM to put these open source models out. People try them. And then whenever they have to build a business, like most of the time you just want to try it right now. Like most of the people want to see what the power is there. And it's something that keeps changing every like 2 months. So it's really, really hard to do what IBM is doing. That is like keeping the pace of how much things are changing every couple of months. But I am sure that then like people try these things and then they say like, okay, let's go back. And now that I need to run them, let's contact IBM. And probably it's even better for like old like financial institutions, pharmaceutical companies, people who have like really big loads, and they say like, well, how do we deal with this? The better your open source proposition is, the more they say like, well, yeah, this has been tested. This is how this other company does it, so we trust it even.
Yeah, I mean, compute is interesting. It's I don't know. It's really interesting because it's moving so fast. There are faster chips coming out all the time. GTC was just happening here in San Jose, close to where I live, and I believe NVIDIA announced even bigger chips and faster. And someone was saying instead of 100 times the amount of tokens we use today, we probably get 10K amount of token usage compared to last year. So it's changing a lot, and there's more and more compute, and then we need energy for all this compute. And even as a company, it's hard to get compute. So you really have to rely on big companies to find your compute. I don't think smaller companies are able to even get some space somewhere to host their own compute.
And then the worst thing that can happen is like your product being successful. Like you are a small company. It's like, well, I have some compute. Let's actually like put the product out there. Then it picks up and you're like, okay, so I'm screwed. Like now, how am I going to get the amount of compute that I need for?
I mean, it's a good and bad problem to have always, of course. But I think with today, if we have 4 major coding agents, if one of them breaks, people are just going to move to the other. I remember when Anthropic was down for like half a day a few weeks ago, I went to OpenAI, and then an hour later, like OpenAI was down. So you can see people moving like, okay, one thing stopped working for me. I'm going to move to the other because everything looks the same today. Everyone is APIs to be used fairly easily. So it's, making sure your service is available is getting more and more important.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see the success of Hugging Face here, because it's really, really hard to do what they are doing. It's not just hosting models, but actually like running them for inference. And they seem to be able to pick up with capacity. And if you see their numbers, they are growing like pretty fast. So kudos for that team. It's not something that I would like to be doing right now.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. I think when I first saw Hugging Face like a few years ago, it was like a directory for models, and that was about it. And if you look at what they're doing today, it's like becoming a whole platform to find models, discover models, run them. I don't know if they do evaluation already, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're working on these kind of features.
Yeah, I don't have any inside knowledge here. We will try to invite someone from them and see what they're planning, like how the roadmap looks for the next like year or so. So for IBM's clients, when they are asking for AI agents right now, what are like their concerns and what are they trying to build?
I think I'm seeing 2 types of clients. I'm seeing clients that are interested in building agents, but have no clue where to start. And then we're seeing clients who are already building agents. They're testing out all the different vendors. They're trying out all the different frameworks. They're putting together POCs internally and trying to figure out how to cut costs or how to be better than their competitors. So it's really 2 types of clients. The first type that doesn't really know what to do and tries to figure out how to get somewhere. We have some low-code or no-code tools that they can use to build their first agents. Personally, the second type is more interesting to me because they're building these agents. They have some idea on what are best practices, but they don't have reliable ways to host the agents, to run them at scale, to get insights like tracing or observability for these agents, and then doing sort of like continuous evaluation. Are my models still doing whatever they should be doing? Because you can imagine maybe one day using Granite for your model, for your agent. The next day, Granite releases a new version. What if all your system prompts no longer work, or all the little optimizations you did along the way are failing? So evaluation is getting more and more important there. It also comes with a risk because the better your evaluation tools, the easier for you it's going to be to try out different models and reduce cost or switch to different vendors. So it's good for the builders. It's maybe harder for the companies. So I'm guessing at some point you really need to go to more specialized models that are doing exactly what you want, so you can get like better scores for all your evaluation.
For the first group, I've seen like some of your videos where you're explaining things like what MCP is, for example. First, IBM has to do like a lot of education. What's the best way for people to learn from IBM about these like broad topics?
So we have a couple of YouTube channels where we create content which is not directly related to the products we build, but more because we want to educate people that know about IBM or even the IBMers itself. There are 300K people working at IBM. So it's also for internal education and making sure everyone is up to date on the latest developments. So in terms of MCP, it's something I personally really like. So I found out about MCP and I thought, I'm getting a lot of questions like internally, externally, like what is it? Why should we use it? So typically I would take those videos and then I go to one of our sites which has a production studio and try and record some content on it. But it's fun to see. It really helps to not only establish your company as a company building products, but also just sharing knowledge, sharing new insights on technology. They might end up looking at the video and finding out what MCP means for IBM customers. They might also look at the video and figure out what MCP is and build their own stuff without even ever considering buying IBM products, which is completely fine. To me, it's all about how can you share knowledge, and if that means someone would buy IBM products, that's great. If it means they're going to use MCP in different ways, then that's also fine, because in the end, everyone will get better.
Yeah, it strengthens the ecosystem for sure. And for anyone who has not seen those videos there, like the content, it's top notch. But also like the production, as you said, I always get blown away by this like transparent board that you have.
Yeah.
It has like a really, really nice effect. So, like people are able to see, it's something that it's pretty different to what most of the people do when they are sharing content, because what they do is like maybe they share the screen or some kind of slides. However, with you, it's like it feels a lot like university, like there's a person there standing and it's able to use the transparent board. So it's really, really nice. Like it's a really good way for me to learn. I really like that kind of edition.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of developer relations and developer marketing work. And this type of content, if you think about content as a funnel, like the really high level content, what is something, like what is tool calling or what is MCP? It's like top of the funnel. You might get 100K people watching it. Then like half of them are going to be interested in seeing screen share videos where someone is actually building it. And then another portion of people are going to actually build the code. And then finally, they might end up in your product and signing up for something or getting to do something. So content really is a funnel, and you need that high level abstraction content in order to get people to a place where they might end up trying your products.
That makes sense. And this was for the first group that you said. And then the second one are the ones that are actually like they already built stuff and they have like or a small product or some like proof of concept that they built. How do those proofs of concept or real products look right now? Like what kind of things are people building with agents?
So a lot of people are building agents, especially for internal processes. I think for external, there might be agents out there, but for all the bigger companies, it's either customer service or it's for some process you don't really get to see as a client or customer of those companies. So they're improving internal processes, trying to speed up development. So everyone is using coding agents in some shape or form. Everyone is using agents that connect to technical documentation. So not all companies keep their docs in GitHub or some other place. Some actually have like files they distribute on Dropbox kind of systems, internal SharePoints, like all these places. And they're just writing documentation there, or they might need to review processes they built years ago. So a lot of these things are internal, and it's showing how to do things faster, or how to reduce spend on certain topics. So that's all the internal stuff people are building. External, I've seen some interesting external agents. I don't think I'm able to share names unless there's some press release on them. But people are mostly able to get information in the hands of internal customers faster or for customer service. And I think there are many customer service agents. They're making it possible to make those chatbots a little bit better. Because I don't know, the first chatbots I saw 8 years ago, all the rule-based stuff, it was really bad. I think today for most bigger companies, if you use the chatbot, you get quite far without needing an actual live person to help you.
Yeah, I have used chatbots, and I can attest that 2017, the chatbot era, was really, really bad. Now they're able to solve my problem. Like most of the time, it's just like I don't want to navigate the full page. So if I say like, what's the return policy? I just want to know it, and I don't want to go through a lot of hopes for getting that, and they are good enough for doing that. So right now, companies are building what could be like vertical agents for specific workflows.
Yeah, you can say it's like vertical agents for workflow. So they typically build an agent that helps the employee doing something. So it typically involves getting data from a SharePoint or an internal wiki or these kind of things, then feeding it to a model. A lot of companies don't want to use public models for this because they're afraid the internal data might be used for training purposes. I think most model providers say they don't, but I mean, can you really believe them? I think if history taught us one thing, it's they might say they won't use your data for something, but in the end, they might very well be using your data for something. So it's typically pulling data from some internal knowledge base and then maybe combining some enterprise APIs. Maybe you have like a HR system which has APIs to retrieve information on employees. They mostly always need guardrails because what if the HR system leaks, like social security numbers or someone's address or someone's marital status or whatever kind of information that should be hidden? And then it's usually parsing this so someone can take an action a little bit quicker.
You have been doing this for a while, so you have seen the evolution of this. So, for example, this idea of an agent that it's a rack system and it's able to get information that it needs and then like pre-process it and like give me the right answer with the right context. It's something that when ChatGPT happened, like most of the people started building these things. So, have you seen an evolution on like performance on this stuff? Like, well, in 2023, people were doing this, but it did not work, and now like this is a solved problem?
I mean, in 2023, we were just all copy pasting content and put it in a question and send it to ChatGPT or whatever system you might have. Then I think last year, or maybe it was already in 23, we saw people like basically uploading any data they had into a vector database and using it through there. And I think last year we really saw structured data with tool calling. So instead of trying to find ways to extract all your data from different places, upload it in a vector database, people were just using the APIs they already have. And I think what we're seeing now is people are finding out ways to make their tool calls better. And I think people start to realize that the APIs you use for your web applications should not be the same APIs you use for large language models. So there's a whole, like MCP is helping for this. You can see LLM providers introducing parallel tool calling or different ways to register tools or extract data from tools. Something I personally like is using GraphQL for this, where you use GraphQL to compose schemas out of different APIs into smaller APIs that are easier and faster to consume. So we really see people building tools based on their existing APIs without actually trying to reinvent the wheel and create more APIs, or just dumbly using the APIs they already had.
Here you just dropped something that is pretty big and you did like as nothing, but it's this idea of maybe LLMs should not use the same APIs that your web server had exposed until now, because that was for the browser and like some kind of UI that you already put there in place for that specific API. What are the main changes there? Like, why should not they use that old stuff that already exists? And when you say like people are learning how to do it better for LLMs, what kind of lessons are there? Like, what did they learn?
So most APIs that I see, they're kind of, if you think about the information structure of an API, if you have products, you have a product's endpoint. If you have customers in a system, you have a customer's endpoint. And all those endpoints will return all the data they have from the customer or product from whatever database. And if you're feeding all this data into the LLM, it's either you're going to use a lot of tokens, it needs to combine different API calls. If you have APIs you build for your web application, you probably build some things in there specifically for the web application. So maybe you have aggregate fields or you have fields that relate to your user interface. I've seen a lot of backend for front ends, so these APIs people build for their web apps, to include information if a dropdown should be shown or an alert should be shown. So models don't care about any of this. Models just care about whatever they need in order to answer your question. So that's where GraphQL comes into play, where developers can pick only the fields they need, and LLMs can do the same thing. They can only request fields that they actually need. Or this is where MCP servers come in that connect to a database, so they can generate the SQL query rather than having someone create endpoints on top of the database that have fixed data structures. So it's really about fixed data structures, which is what we typically do for web apps, versus dynamic data structures, which is what models need, because every question is different. I might need different data.
Okay, so here the main takeaway would be this idea of recall and precision for APIs. Like the models just need the exact information that they need for answering you, nothing more, but also nothing less. And then the current APIs were built for some other stuff. So, like there was some code that was cleaning it. So most of the time when they hit the product's endpoint, it returns all that stuff, but it only shows like the ID and I don't know, like the JavaScript just cleans it for the ID, the name, and the price.
Yeah.
That's what the LLM should have received: the ID, the name, and the price, because it's the only thing that it's important for it to answer you. And then it's where GraphQL can be really, really helpful, because it makes sure that you are able to ask what you need and don't receive like more stuff that can pollute your Windows context. That still it's a problem in LLMs right now. Would you say like this is like the main thing?
I guess that's the main thing, yes. If you look back at what GraphQL was ever designed for, it was Facebook, which had two APIs. They had an API for the web applications, and then they had a separate API for their mobile app. And if you go back like 10 years, your mobile phone was way slower. The internet connections, I think we might have like 2G or maybe 3G, but maybe not even. So they found out we either rebuild every API for the mobile app, which is showing less information and needs to be faster, or we're going to find some way to dynamically create a single API that's able to serve multiple clients. And that turned out to be working well for them in that sense. If you think about the usage with large language models, bandwidth for mobile phones is almost free. People have unlimited plans, so they don't really care about more or less data. If you think about token spends, tokens are not that expensive, but if imagine doing a task 100 times, it suddenly gets expensive. So you want to reduce the token usage, and having some dynamic API on top of your already existing APIs is a good way to limit the usage of tokens.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it matches my experience of like the things that I am building and the things that I see other people building there. That's why I wanted to distill it. So like people get the main idea that it's like, well, your LLM should not be receiving everything because it's actually polluting the context windows. And how you express what GraphQL does, it shows that it's a solution for this problem, because it's this idea of dynamically generate a fetch for whatever the data that you need.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about LLMs in the next 6 to 9 months?
So what I would hope to see is MCP really taking off. So getting a structure for remote servers that really works and that's being well adopted, with way more developer tools around it. And then in terms of models, I hope to think so. We saw a lot of reasoning models. I would really hope to see models getting even better at tool calling and showing some reasoning behind why they're calling tools, maybe even built-in tool calls. Like, could we have models execute little code artifacts? Things like that would really excite me.
And something that you would like people to stop doing, saying like, guys, like it's like this already changed. Can you please stop behaving as if this was like 2022?
I would like to see more people, and I post about this on LinkedIn quite a lot as well. I hope to see more people using coding agents in a similar fashion how they would write normally their code. So use Git, use ways to check in your code, test your code, and not just have LLMs generated, but actually use LLMs to also make sure your code is fault proof. Because I see a lot of people just copy pasting whatever the model generates and leave it at that.
I really like that take. It's basically like we have been doing software development for a long while. Now there is LLMs doing a bit of software development. Can we please adopt the right practices and not restart as if,
Yeah, look at the model as your team member. If your team member, you're going to give your team member feedback on their code, but you also want to build upon their code and want them to check in their code and write some sort of test so they can hand it over to you.
Excellent, Roy. So it was a pleasure having you in the podcast. I would like to let people know where can you find you and what's the best way to contact if like they're interested into joining IBM or something like that?
Yeah, so you can find me basically on all social media channels with the handle @hackteam. It's a long story to the name. Maybe if I come back one day, I can explain it to you.
You will for sure. Like in 1 year, like we need to do a recap of, okay, like did people start using the LLM code generator as a team member, or they are still doing it as if it was 2022?
Yeah, then we can call out all my wrong predictions.
Okay, so that's your handler. I'm going to make sure that it appears in the release notes and things like that. And anything else that you would like to share?
I would mostly tell people like keep doing what you're doing, keep trying AI, keep using coding agents, keep trying out different models, and there's something new to learn every day. So I would recommend everyone to keep trying all these different tools.
Excellent. So really happy to have you here and looking forward for our next chat.
Yes, it was great seeing you again.
Thank you, Roy. See you soon.
Bye-bye.